Pros, save more on what you need to get the job done right. Right now at Lowe's. Get 15% off select custom entry and interior doors. Plus, save $80 on the DeWalt 20-volt Max 2-tool combo kit. Now just $169. And at the Lowe's Pro Desk, bring us your materials list and get a quote in minutes. Handwritten, a photo, or even a sticky note is all you need. Keep your jobs moving faster and on budget at Lowe's. Valid through 7/8 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the Cooler Heads podcast that's more leisurely ramble than penalty shootout. I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Alex Andreou, here to say, but why to everything like an annoying toddler?
All while reminding you that there are plenty of things you can do to help make the world an infinitely better place.
So realign yourself, recline yourself, and resign yourself to another Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
This week, as Starmer's administration rushes to hand in all its homework before the end of term and Burnham's administration buys its brand new pencil case, we'll look at the subjects each class is choosing before Parliament heads into another long vacay.
Plus, we'll be casting our eye ahead to the Greater Manchester mayoral by-election that comes up in a few short weeks, while on Friday, Kenny will be bringing you Quiet Riot B-side. This week, our resident Highlander heads north to chat with the director of IPPR Scotland, Stephen Boyd, about everything happening in Holyrood.
Helping us today, we're delighted to welcome back to the show the MP for North Herefordshire and leader of the Green Party in the House of Commons, Ellie Chowns. Welcome back, Ellie.
Thanks so much.
Nice to see you again. Now, Ellie, at the time of the Brexit debate, Michael Gove promised that leaving the EU would not only have no detrimental impact on environmental policy, but increase standards. Let's just have a little listen.
We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get this right. We have an opportunity to ensure that in this country we can develop the institutions and mechanisms that the world will look to and admire as the most effective in protecting our environment and enhancing our countryside. And more than that, we have an opportunity to be global leaders in the fight against climate change, global leaders when it comes to animal welfare and the fight against the illegal wildlife trade, global leaders in ensuring that we recognise that as we write that next chapter in our national history, we have a chance to make that chapter one of global significance.
10 years on, the Wildlife Trust has released a short report looking at Brexit's impact on the environment. Was Michael Gove right?
No. Has Michael Gove ever been right about anything? I mean, we don't have long enough in the next hour to dig into that. But no, he really wasn't right about this particular thing, among many other things. And this Wildlife Trust report shows us exactly why. You know, it sets out, I think the EU has adopted 28 new environmental standards since Brexit.
Yeah.
We've not kept up with any of them, you know, because we came out of the chemicals regulation.
That's right.
And there are 42 substances that are high on the highly dangerous substance list that the EU has got that we did absolutely nothing about for 5 years.
Marvellous.
You know, there's any number of ways in which our environmental performance has fallen way behind. And even according to our own targets, you know, the targets that we've got under the Environment Act, the targets that we've got under our sovereign, the targets over which we have, you know, we didn't have to take back control. We've set them ourselves. And even those, you know, we are nowhere close to meeting most of them. It's one of many problems, obviously, associated with Brexit. I campaigned long and hard to stay in the EU. When I was in there as a member of the European Parliament, I was campaigning hard for us to stay in. It's clearly just been a huge, I mean, error is too small a word. It's a disaster. It frankly is for the country. And we are paying the price in so many ways.
Because EU membership isn't just about setting standards, although it does that well. It creates like this ratchet that only moves you upwards kind of effect when you have it enforced externally. It makes backsliding structurally harder. So it's not just about setting the standard. It's also making sure that it becomes a race to the top, not the bottom.
It's kind of insane for individual countries to do their own chemicals regulation, right? When so many products they're cross-border.
Yeah. If we want to sell anything into the European market, we've got to make sure we're using pesticides that they are comfortable with and don't think are highly carcinogenic and terrible for the population. And hopefully that will be something that the agri-food deal can ensure we get alignment on. But, it's just sort of one tiny area. You're right, whether it's medicines, whether it's climate-related issues, even workers' rights.
I mean, in fairness, I do think that the Labour government has made some improvements in terms of employment rights. We've just had another couple of votes on them today. But certainly in the environmental arena, absolutely, it's been all sliding back. Brexit has created this space in which the current government, very problematically, is seeking to row back even more. So last year I was really involved in sitting on the Bill Committee for the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, this ridiculous piece of legislation that came forward with a thing on the front of it that says, this does not roll back our environmental protections. And literally the Office for Environmental Protection, the independent kind of watchdog, was saying, excuse me, actually it does. We've still got that narrative coming from the government of seeing nature, seeing environmental protection as a blocker to unrestrained growth. That is this very, very simplistic agenda that they're pursuing. Whereas, of course, we know that actually the natural world is the fundamental basis for so much, for all of our prosperity, to be perfectly frank, and in such obvious ways as well. I mean, farming is such a key example of that.
I guess they would suggest that the problem is not with protecting the natural environment. The problem is when complicated planning laws are used by people who don't want anything built, really, who don't want anything to change. And we do have a system that attaches rather a lot of weight on the views of those who already own property to dictate what gets built and where.
But actually, public participation in the planning system is a really fundamental part of the legitimacy of the planning system. If you block committees from getting involved, if you block public involvement in the planning process, you really lose something very, very important. And it's not just people who own land you have a say. Actually, by blocking public participation, you make it harder for other people who have an interest who don't own the land to participate in that process. So yes, let's always have, be open to having grown-up, sensible, serious conversations about how we can make sure that the correct balance is struck. But the point that I'm making here is that I am really worried about the rhetoric coming from this government now. I mean, we'll see. Perhaps I'm sure we'll come on.
Everything
maybe this is going to change.
Because all that matters is growth. I am with you completely. I find that a very suspicious and really aggressive way of going about it. I'm just saying that I get a letter saying there's something about to be built down the road. Do you object or not? Do the thousands of people who might buy a flat in that development, do they get a say?
But Alex, so this is exactly what I am worried about, because I think it is so false to make the argument that it's people trying to protect nature who are stopping young people getting on the housing ladder.
That's not what I'm saying.
It's such a misleading caricature.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But that's the argument that is too often made, that it's the people who are it's the people who are protecting the bats that mean that young people can't get access to housing. That's just completely untrue. It's the obscene profits being made by the developers. It's the land bankers that are sitting on these plots of land for which they have planning permission and yet refusing to build.
I agree with you completely. It is those people who have an interest in restricting supply because it makes their asset more valuable who are doing this. But you have to accept that they have become experts at using all aspects of planning regulation to get to that objective.
Yeah, the developers aren't making the arguments about, we must protect nature. I'm worried about criticisms that are really broad brush. I'm worried about mushing together people who have a legitimate desire to protect precious natural environments with people who want to block any sort of development at any cost because they want to protect their assets or because they're lucky enough to own a big house with a nice view and they don't want anybody else to be living in the vicinity. Absolutely, that is problematic. And of course, those arguments have been used to kind of criticise Greens, but we are passionately in favour of building more social housing. We're passionately in favour of young people having a fair crack at the whip. Our position is the right home at the right price in the right place.
And we can all agree that it was not our EU membership that clipped the wings of any sovereign government from building the homes that we need, for upgrading the housing stock that already existed, that prevented councils from borrowing to build, etc. Just bringing it back to the original point, which was, has Brexit been good for the environment? No, it hasn't. And it certainly hasn't been good for house building.
No. Do you know what was really weird about watching those old clips of Gove? How earnest he was. I think he's what I call a method liar. He gets really into the role. He absolutely appeared as someone who passionately believed in all that stuff. To the extent that if he now weren't editing the Spectator and had turned to let's drill everywhere for oil sort of attitude, because that's the prevailing far-right fashion, I would have believed that he believed it. Mm-hmm. But obviously actions speak a lot louder than words.
Quiet. Riot. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Quiet. Riot. So the last few sitting days before recess, and Westminster is in a strange sort of limbo. We've got Keir Starmer, the outgoing Prime Minister, still showing up to PMQs and still signing off government business, even though everyone knows he's on his way out. And then we've got Andy Burnham, the incoming favourite, who isn't even PM yet, giving what was billed as his first major policy speech this week on devolution, growth, and what he's calling number 10 in the North. It's an odd kind of double government, one administration finishing its homework, the other already sketching out whether it will still have double maths on a Wednesday morning next term and who it's going to appoint as its prefects. Before the summer break, ministers are also trying to push through the last bits of business that they can, including new asylum and defence investment plans, both of which will likely define how whomever is PM by September gets judged on security and borders. And away from Westminster, the Greater Manchester mayoral by-election is heating up, with the Green Party going all in on what they're calling a surge campaign. So plenty to get through, including some proper Commons atmospherics, Ellie, because there is only one of us in this podcast studio who's actually been sitting in that chamber over the last couple of weeks. You are there. You're listening to Starmer making his last few appearances. Tell us what that actually feels like. Is there a strange atmosphere when everyone knows the PM answering questions is halfway out the door?
It is a bit weird, to be honest. I was in PMQs today and again last week. And last week it was interesting because it was the first PMQs after he'd announced that he was resigning. And it felt like he was a man off the leash. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. He was speaking kind of much more off script. He was speaking more from the heart. He felt exactly much better.
Someone had their Weetabix this morning.
Exactly. I mean, last week also, Kemi was just showing the absolute worst side of her, which is...
It's interesting how much she pulled it back this week, isn't it? Because I think she was criticised quite a lot last week for kicking him when he's on his way
including,
out.
I mean, I spoke to a senior Tory who was clearly, thought it was appalling. But this week, I actually had a member of staff in the gallery, and it's their first time visiting.
Right.
Can't quite remember the words that they used, but it was something about it's kind of even worse in person.
Oh, yeah.
Even more disappointing.
More of a punch
You know, that
show,
it's just such a poor window on our politics. So that's PMQs. Of course, there is so much more that goes on.
Yeah.
I mean, the last few weeks, there has been a lot of little clumps of Labour MPs whispering in corridors.
Yeah.
I've had quite a few chats with Labour colleagues who are looking pretty chirpy about the prospect of a change of I mean that's a kind
So
of quite
cynical.
yeah, exactly, that's kind of cynical. I mean, I genuinely believe a lot of people are there in politics to serve the public interest for reasons of public service, across a number of different parties. We actually had a debate this morning on banning MPs' second jobs, and we're making the point, there are a handful of MPs who definitely are not there to serve the public interest, but there were a number of people that I like and have a lot of time for in the Labour Party who were saying, I'm feeling very happy about the change of direction, that it was time for that. But there's still a lot up in the air. I mean, which Burnham is going to turn up?
Right, and who will he appoint? We'll get on to some of that. But when we think about the mechanism of Parliament and the scrutiny of the legislative process, how does this stasis that the Labour Party finds itself in affect how stuff gets scrutinised? Because they are still pushing through stuff. You are still voting. You voted today. Have you felt an impact on the scrutiny, or are people sort of just letting stuff happen and will...
It definitely affects it. I mean, we are having a very quiet few weeks, frankly. There's almost no legislation being brought forward. There are bills that we were expecting and hoping to see. For example, the representation of the people bill. We were hoping that would come back to Parliament. The government was previously saying we're in a terrible hurry to kind of get this through, really pushing to get it finished in the Commons before the summer. The other day, they were still making noises about that, but there's absolutely no sign of that happening. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it waited until September. And of course, that from my perspective, that could be a very positive thing, because we certainly I am hoping for a bit of a change of mood music, not just electoral reform, but also absolutely control of big money in politics, tackling disinformation. All of that is really key. So that's on, a bill that I've been engaged in the minutiae of. But there are all sorts of other things. We had a King's Speech, got whatever it is, a list of 40 bills. Can't see hide nor hair of pretty much any of them yet.
And September is not a new session.
No.
So, but it could be a new session, couldn't it? Like, if the new Prime Minister wanted, they could prorogue Parliament and have another King's Speech, couldn't they?
Yeah, honestly, Alex, that thought actually had not occurred to me, but technically I suppose they could. It would be a bit...
weird.
A bit weird.
Yeah.
Also
because it's usually a minimum a year, isn't it?
Also because, I mean, I don't really see the technical reason for doing that. There's a heck of a lot of pomp and circumstance involved in the whole proroguing and King's Speechifying and all the rest of it. I mean, we saw last session that there were various things they announced in the 2024 King's Speech that didn't actually get brought forward. And then there were some things that were brought forward that weren't in that speech. So I don't think there's technically a reason for doing it.
It's like broad and vague enough to pursue.
Burnham, I think, would be perfectly able to bring forward new bills if he wanted to.
Yeah.
What I think is probably more likely is that there'll be a shuffling of prioritisation of the things that are already in the pipeline. Because, of course, by the point of... When you get a bill to Parliament, there's a heck of a lot of work that has gone on in advance of that, white papers and consultations and endless drafting and so forth.
Or at least that should have happened. It doesn't always happen. And there is insufficient legislative scrutiny of far too many of the stuff.
Indeed.
I ask this because I'm genuinely in two minds about it. I see some signs like the Defence Investment Plan, or it was announced today that suddenly teachers' pay has just been agreed.
Yeah.
I know. And one does get the sense that there are a lot of secretaries of state that are going, fine, why should I be arguing and becoming the Cruella de Vil of the piece instead of just...
When I'm probably not going to still be enjoying...
Have what you need. So there is a little bit of that. On the other hand, there are briefings that Andy Burnham is being allowed to organize meetings with senior civil servants, and that he's asked for briefings in various areas and has had them, and they've been very open. And so I'm genuinely in two minds. Is this government doing it slightly better by making the handover less confrontational and sort of bitchy than it sometimes tends to be when a prime minister has been deposed? Or are they storing up a lot of problems for the Burnham administration?
Well, I'd love to get your pulse on the defence investment plan point, because I think that's where...
Which is one of those areas,
yeah,
isn't it?
the one that's been in the news the most. The plan that obviously caused the resignations of John Healey and Al Khan's, but The Guardian got the scoop that Burnham had not been told that he would have to find the extra nearly £5 billion to fund it in his first budget, which is 4 months away at most, 5 months away.
3 weeks ago, the Defence Secretary resigned, saying, I am being forced to make decisions that would increase the risk to personnel on operations and could make the country less safe. We can count, the generals can count, the Kremlin can count. His plan doesn't add up. How can the Prime Minister possibly stand there and say that this is enough?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the most significant upgrade in defence spending since the 1980s. The Chief of the Defence Staff has been clear that the plan accelerates the transformation we need for our armed forces. The First Sea Lord, it funds the capability we need to fight and win. The Chief Air Staff strengthens our contribution to NATO, and she must have missed that yesterday the Secretary-General of NATO welcomed the plan. All people who know what's in the plan and welcome it. Contrast that, Mr. Speaker, with their record in government, because they hollowed out the armed forces. Their record is cutting defence spending. My record is raising it to £300 billion and rising. Their record is cutting frigates by a quarter, cutting mine hunters by a half, and leaving 47 of 49 defence programmes delayed or over budget. My record is the biggest boost to defence investment since the 1980s. Their record is missing army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. We've given our armed force the biggest pay rise for 20 years and increased defence funding by £15 billion a year. That's a record I'm proud to stand on.
So, cock-up or conspiracy, what do we think? Was it designed to punish him? Was it not?
I don't know that it's that unusual. I think a lot of the Guardian's recent scoops feel not so scoopy to me. Well, it's not unusual for a review of a policy area to come between two budgets and to announce money that will then have to be committed and found and funded.
Yeah, but their scoop is that he wasn't told that. It's not that your point, which of course, yes,
Yeah, but I guess the Defence Investment Plan was ready to be published before all this stuff started. So what was the possible alternative outcome that he said no, and then this government, on its way out, had to somehow scramble to fund money for next year and
I
the
found
year
it for
after
him.
and the year
By the way, I
after.
have found it for him. 93 billion over the long term if we rejoin the EU, and about 13 billion a year. So absolutely fine.
I love
3
a
times over.
one-track
It's fine.
mind.
It's
I
fine.
do love a one-track mind. I mean, the government spends roughly £1 trillion each budget. £1 billion each year for 4 years is a rounding error. So I think a meal is being made out of it, because they're probably lining up their excuses for when they get into government so that they can say the mess we inherited.
On the defence investment plan, I mean, there's loads to say about this, but your specific question, Naomi, I think that does get to the heart of it, because it seems absolutely crystal clear, not least because the government's just not denying it, that Burnham was not told that there would be a funding black hole.
Yeah.
It even appears, I mean, there were ministers who were not told that money that was identified as being taken for it was being taken from roads projects in their areas.
Yeah.
So, and now they're irate. So there's clearly issues about that, about the communication of that. And of course, what would have happened if that had been made clear to Andy Burnham? Well, of course, the risk is that he might have put his foot down and said, no, absolutely no way, you cannot publish this. What I imagine was kind of going on was people saying, look, we really want to get this out. Keir Starmer's legacy, NATO next week. Yeah. We want to be able to kind of, we've worked really hard to squeeze something out of this that could possibly be presented as a fulfillment of some sort of commitment, but omitting the crucial detail, because quite possibly if Burnham had been told that, he might have said, hang on, I am not prepared to kind of give the nod to something.
I think your point, Alex, in terms of the motivation, it isn't focused on punishing Burnham or creating a difficult situation for him. It is focused on legacy building. There is this frantic thing going on at the moment.
Exactly. And I think, it's all a bit hollow, given that it's been such a dog's breakfast of a process, really, the whole defence investment plan. I find it a bit sad, really, to see this desperate attempt to sort of cobble together some sort of legacy by putting out this thing that is really from so many different people's perspectives, half-cooked in various different respects.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
Well, somebody who probably will be staying in and around the cabinet, if not in their actual post, is Shabana Mahmood, Home Secretary, and the new asylum plan that is also being pushed through before recess leans quite heavily on detention and faster removal. Ellie, where do you think that lands on the kind of spectrum between Labour's old position and what reform have been demanding, and where the last 2 years of Labour thinking has sort of edged towards?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's not just the last 2 years of Labour thinking, though, is it? Because didn't they have those mugs in the mid-2010s that were kind of anti-migration?
Controls on immigration.
And this is so problematic. It's so wrong. It's so sad as well. And it's so not British. You know, we are a proudly diverse nation. We're a nation that should be celebrating that should be leaning into that should be proudly owning our identity as a place that has been shaped by migration in all directions for literally centuries. And we are also, you know, the best of us, the best of the British identity is generosity and hospitality and care for the underdog.
It's just so very, very sad. I agree with you. But do you see and sense from the people you speak to in the Parliamentary Labour Party that they are broadly content with or broadly ashamed of this more hostile approach towards asylum?
It's really difficult to generalise about the PLP, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it is huge. It is itself quite a spectrum. And to be honest, the members of the PLP that I spend more time with are by definition the people with whom I have things in common, because we are working together on causes, whether that's environmental issues or social justice issues or issues of international affairs and so far, constitutional issues, etc. You know, I see many people in the Labour Party who clearly feel hugely uncomfortable with the sort of rhetoric that we've seen coming out of the Labour government over the past 2 years. This latest thing about kind of making asylum seekers kind of pay back £10,000. And that just seems so antithetical to all of the things that Labour supposedly stands for. You know, it's not even clear, if you're earning the minimum wage, but which is the minimum wage, right? Which is the basic that you need, and then you have to pay it back.
I think they said if they make over X amount, which most experts say they won't get there for many, many years. That sort of unskilled worker, I guess, that has language barriers. And so it's more performative cruelty again. Rather than even an actual plan that will generate some money.
Exactly.
Which makes it worse in a way, doesn't it?
It's performative policy rather than practical, pragmatic policy. And it doesn't get anywhere close. It's a distraction. It's an active distraction from addressing the real issues that are fundamental here. The desperate need for more safe managed routes for people to be able to seek asylum. The desperate need for even more investment in the processing of asylum applications so that they are done much faster. The desperate need for allowing people seeking asylum to work, to support themselves while they're waiting for their applications to be processed. All of these things are specific policies that would make a really practical difference to the way that the system works. And at the same time, one of the most worrying things is that by feeding into or leaning into what is effectively demonisation of a tiny, tiny proportion of the population of extremely vulnerable people, they are just simply feeding the narrative peddled by people like Reform and now Restore that is a total distraction from the issues that are really at the core of what matters in our country.
Inequality, not immigration, that is causing your life to be crap.
Exactly. Inequality, not immigration. I mean, you know, another thing that was announced that came out yesterday, this revelation that Nigel Farage earned
gold billion,
earned in very inverted commas, £270,000 for 12 hours of work. You know, 22 grand an hour. It's absolutely obscene. And this is a man who's already paid nearly 100 grand a year to supposedly be representing his constituents. This completely makes a mockery of the idea that party stands for defending the rights of struggling families.
And the left behind.
And it just highlights so clearly the way that anti-immigrant sentiment is being stirred up by the far right in order to distract attention from what is really going on in our country, which is rampant inequality.
While you're getting poorer. I want to go back to the point you made about working with MPs from other parties and Labour in particular.
You know, we all form relationships within Parliament. We kind of cooperate and work together based on the issues that we care about. We have this absolutely stupid electoral system that sets people up in kind of binary opposition to each other and results in elections where, huge majority of the votes cast don't influence the outcome.
But you do have a leader who has said, our job is to replace the Labour Party. We're here to replace the Labour Party. I mean, that in itself is combative language, albeit coming from somebody who is very much in favour of electoral reform himself.
I wouldn't use that phrase myself personally. It is combative and binary in a sense. I believe in a pluralist form of politics. I believe in a form of politics where even if I completely disagree with another party's perspective, I don't dispute their right to exist within the spectrum.
So presumably you quite liked Andy Burnham's speech where he really did talk up that pluralism and in Manchester have worked across party. That is the culture I want to emulate.
I always welcome cooperative approaches to politics. Recently, we were commemorating the terrible murder of Joe Cox and reminding ourselves we should always remind ourselves. But with Joe Cox's specific words, there's more that unites us than divides us. And that, that's a kind of fundamental political truth that we should all hold in our hearts at all times. And so for me, that cooperative approach to politics, an approach that focuses on looking for common ground, even when I am haranguing ministers in the chamber, I do try to start with or to pay tribute to where we have got common ground at all times. And I think we do have to have that more constructive politics. We can start to create more of a culture of that, but we have to have structural change. So I did think it was very interesting. I watched Andy Burnham's speech and I did think it was very interesting that he did quite a lot of that sort of tone setting at the beginning. And I think that is positive rhetoric. I want to see him follow through,
of course.
Both in terms of his actual approach to governing. I mean, it's interesting. He's also making noises about changing the way that the whipping system works. So it'll be interesting to see how much which we don't have. But, within the Labour Party, does that more expansive and inclusive attitude, a more pluralistic approach, will there be evidence of that working within the Labour Party as well as in terms of how Labour connects with, interacts with and finds common ground with other parties?
Quiet Riot.
Just to round off the immigration stuff, I think a lot of people have bought quite a corrosive argument that if progressive-leaning people don't get a grip of the immigration issue, then we will end up with a far-right government that will do it in a much worse way. So we should try and do it in a more compassionate way. But the truth is that it does feed into the general notion that immigrants are a bad thing, that immigrants are a problem, when everything we know historically and economically points to the precise opposite. So I guess, is there a way of making an argument that is about control of the borders? Because I do think it needs to be controlled. We need to know who's coming in and who's going out of the country at a very basic level. But is there a way of making that argument while also saying immigration is a really good thing and we need more of it? Certainly the numbers we're getting now will land us in massive financial
I think we do need to start talking about the benefits of immigration and particularly freedom of movement. If Europe are looking to, the EU is looking to the UK in terms of where we might go with our relationship with Europe, they will need to see that people are beginning to make the positive case for it. When we at Best Written poll freedom of movement, the answers are good. Like, the polling is strong. And that's when nobody is advocating it. To Ellie's point earlier, when we poll immigration at the moment, you ask people, do you think it's a problem in your local area? Thinking about your local area, are you worried about population growth and immigration? No. Do you think it's a problem for the country? Oh, yes. Terrible. Number one important issue, right?
That disconnect,
so that disconnect, we think, is because of the right-wing media and the far-right voices across Reform, Restore, the Conservatives to an extent, and even elements of the Labour Party whipping it up and blaming those people is what makes people fearful of it. The opposite must also be true, that once political leaders start making the case for freedom of movement and immigration, you would expect that polling result to go even further north in terms of support. And surely, for those who are naturally sceptical about immigration, the answer is to say to them, well, of course, it's much better to have a reciprocal arrangement very nearby, because those people are much less likely to come for extended periods of time because it's so easy for them to go back, and they are much less likely to bring their entire family with them. Now, I'm very happy for them to come and stay forever and to bring all of their family with them, but I accept that there are people that need some persuading. And
this is very predictable stuff. Like, you know where the jobs are going to be created. You know how many people are going to come. It really is not rocket science to say we're going to need X more school places and X more GP practices. It's not beyond the wit of man to plan for immigration. Otherwise, if suddenly a factory opens and 20,000 people move from Manchester to a small town, you have the same problem, even though they're English. So it's that inability to plan for population movements that's the big
successive
problem.
Governments have failed to do it. And I always point to Canada as an example where they have had a much more interventionist approach to immigration and population management than here in the UK, where we have had a very laissez-faire approach to it for a very, very, very long time. The Canadian state will do things like offer free English and French courses to new migrants arriving. It helps with that interculturalism. It avoids segregation in communities that huddle together because language barriers are so difficult. They will move to where, their friends and family have previously moved to. And it just makes it all a lot more absorbable for the Canadians who were already living there. And then, they're ultimately much, much happier with it. But someone's also just got to level with the country and be honest about the economic impact. If things continue in the direction that they are going on immigration numbers, we are going to face a very, very difficult situation with our falling birth rate and lack of migrants coming here to
We're all going to be sitting in our own poop.
Well, I was literally visiting a care home at the weekend where the majority of frontline staff were from abroad, working incredibly hard, doing incredibly important work, caring for extremely vulnerable Brits who were, towards the end of their lives or living with severe Alzheimer's, things like that. The people who were working they're migrants. They're incredibly skilled. I spoke to a couple who had 20 years of experience as nurses. They were working as care assistants while doing their exams to get their qualifications recognised in the British system. These are people who are making an incredibly important contribution, not just an economic contribution, but actually a social contribution.
Exactly. And then you have some right-wing think tank go, these people are a drain on the system because their salary is only X and they're not going to pay enough tax. And it's like, no, their contribution to the system is that they're looking after your mum that you don't want to look after. What's your fucking contribution to the system?
We need to have kind of nuanced conversations about these things, because at the same time, as we are relying on labour from overseas to do these really important roles, yes, we have young people struggling really, really hard to get on the job ladder and really struggling to find employment. And I hear that from individual young people who are sending out endless, dozens and dozens of applications and getting nowhere. So, in that context, there are things that are clearly not joining up very well in our labour market, in our education and skills systems. We need far more investment, in my view, in vocational training. We need to give it parity with academic training. And I say that as a former academic. So there are many, many moving parts. But back to your kind of original point there, Alex, about immigration, the rhetoric about it. Basically, is it that there is an actual kind of physical problem with lots of people and the impacts that has, or is it a problem of the rhetoric? Absolutely, it's a problem of the rhetoric. So if we were to lean into saying, oh yeah, there's an issue about immigration, we're going to focus lots of policy on dealing with that, as Labour are doing, that just feeds it, in my view. Actually, what there is a problem with fairness, and that is what drives many people's susceptibility to stories. I was just reading a full fact thing earlier today about, this ridiculous story that some housing estate was just being filled with immigrants and local people couldn't get any of it. This stuff is completely not true. The reason that some people are susceptible to kind of believing that is because they're worried about themselves or their kids or grandkids not being able to get housing and not being able to get jobs. And that is, that is a real problem that we should be tackling. I want to see a state that is intervening to tackle those fundamental unfairnesses, the inability of ordinary people to be able to afford the basics of life, to raise a family, you know, to
enjoy life.
It shouldn't be rocket science to want to be able to kind of put food on the table and go for a holiday from time to time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so we need to build an economy that works for everybody to be able to do that.
Quiet, riot. Quiet, riot.
Well, obviously, the incoming Prime Minister almost certainly is going to be Andy Burnham. He's got plans for some of that, including shaking up how the executive is located.
The change will be driven through the Prime Minister's office in an extended operation based here in Manchester. But here's the important thing. It will only be based here. The job of Number 10 North will be to make power flow into the Midlands, into the southwest, into the east of England, and yes, into London, as I said before, as much as into the northeast, Yorkshire and the Humber, and here in the northwest. It will be about offering new opportunities to extend devolution in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland by taking power deeper down. The people of Dundee and Bangor feel just as distant from Holyrood and the Senedd as they do from Westminster. Now get this. Number 10 North will be the nerve centre of a rewired Britain.
How seriously is Burnham's Number 10 in the North idea being taken in Parliament? Have you heard any mutterings about it, Ellie?
I was chatting to somebody yesterday and I honestly can't remember who it was, but they were very sceptical about the idea.
Oh, really?
I mean, they literally said the world leaders aren't going to want to traipse up to Manchester to see Burnham, kind of thing. I mean,
they will if he offers them free tickets to the football.
Fair point, well made.
You know, I appreciate kind of people bringing fresh thinking. I appreciate the kind of recognition that we are an incredibly unbalanced country, that there's far too much that's London-centric. And I think that, you know, the sort of, actually performative politics in some senses does matter in terms of sending a signal. So Burnham is sending a very clear signal that he's going to govern for and from.
He's not even going to live in Number 10
the
Downing
whole
Street.
country.
Yeah. But Alex, shouldn't he just go the whole hog and move Parliament? I mean, the palace is falling down anyway. It needs major work. Shouldn't he just say, right, that's it, we're moving Parliament to Manchester or Birmingham? Or
in some ways, that would be easier than moving a big department or moving half of Number 10, actually, which is something that's been tried, I think, a few times and has not gone very well because departments involve international travel both ways. They interact with big business, procuring services, and they're all kind of in London. Yeah, other departments. All of it is concentrated around London. On the contrary, Parliament is a weirdly self-contained environment. When it's in session, it demands almost all of your time, and members of Parliament are used to travelling to the location of the Parliament from their various constituencies. So maybe moving Parliament to somewhere that's geographically more equidistant to the various bits of the UK, like the Midlands, would make sense. It would actually make sense. The only people that would create extra work for are the ministers and secretaries of state who would have to travel at short notice if they need to make an urgent statement or something. All of this would be so much easier if HS2 had opened this year as it was meant to when it was announced 15 years ago. If we were talking about a 40-minute journey to Birmingham, then it's commuting. It's not even in a different place.
Ellie, North Hertfordshire, not too far from Birmingham.
Do you know what? I've actually changed my mind on this.
Oh, really?
In recent years.
In the palace.
I very much hope not.
But it would also be a good opportunity to update the building.
Let me explain why. So I do think we should be in a different building, actually.
Yeah.
And I'll come on to that. But in terms of the actual physical location, because I used to think exactly that. Why not have a nice modern building in Birmingham? Yeah. I was thinking, by the NEC or something. Yeah. For exactly that reason, because, all you need is a place where the 650 MPs can kind of come in on a Monday, go home on a Thursday and kind of Bob's your uncle. What I didn't realise, of course, is that Parliament isn't just a community of 650 MPs.
Parliament's
actually,
it.
it's 10,000 people work on the estate at any one time. And all of those people have got families. Those kids will be in school. Those spouses will have other jobs elsewhere. It's not just about uprooting the people who already spent half their lives in one place and half their lives in somewhere else. It would be an absolutely enormous undertaking to put all of those people somewhere else. And then, I mean, your point about ministers, like we had an urgent state, you get 1 hour's notice for an urgent statement, basically. Yep. You simply can't have ministries that are more than an hour's travel time from the place where people have to come to be accountable to Parliament. And so, just to finish the point on this, so I have come to the conclusion that actually it is sensible for Parliament to be in the capital city. Building-wise, though, yes, the Palace of Westminster is falling down, absolutely infested with rats, wiring, leaks, fires, all the rest of it is very well known. Somebody has to bite the bullet and do the place up. But I don't want to keep sitting on those ridiculous green benches in that ridiculous binary kind of oppositional. I think we should have...
The architecture of it basically encourages confrontation.
Exactly. You need a hemicycle. You need a place where you can actually bring your laptop and plug it in. You need a place where you can do electronic voting. These kind of basic design elements. And so there is an opportunity. And actually, I mean, the place is... parts of it, the House of Lords, absolutely dripping with gold leaf and such like. Make that into a museum. Is kind of it seems really sensible. And then have a modern, purpose-built parliamentary building in London, I think, where people can just get the business done much more efficiently. And reform the House of Lords while you're at it.
If the last few hereditary peers still want to collect the daily allowance, they can show up and
they can be the tour guides of the museum. Exactly. Okay,
look, I'm not saying it wouldn't be difficult. I'm saying it's not undoable.
I am going to move you both on. We need to talk about Manchester and the forthcoming by-election for the mayoralty there. Mentioned at the top of the show, Ellie, that the Greens are calling it a surge effort. They're framing it as a straight fight between the Green Party and Reform. So as somebody who loves a bit of electoral reform, does that framing hold up when it is not a first-past-the-post election, which this isn't?
Yeah, I mean, this is supplementary vote, isn't it? What that means is it's kind of binary in the first round, and then the second votes get allocated to whoever the second preferences are. I would imagine or hope that if it's Greens versus Reform in the first round, that many Labour voters would put the Greens as their second preference, and vice versa. And of course, it's interesting. The government rushed through reintroducing supplementary vote for this in order to put that in place.
Tell us a bit about your candidate.
Geraldine, well, she's great. I don't actually know her very well, in fact. Hannah knows her really, really well. And Hannah sings her praises to the skies.
The seal of approval.
Absolutely. Great. She does. And I've seen her in action in a meeting, very, very calm, very level-headed, very serious, as in serious politician. She's somebody who I think would do a really excellent job as the mayor of Greater Manchester, and really fantastic candidate. So I'm planning to go up when I can, sometime in July, to be part of the campaign. And of course, we've got a great track record, haven't we, in that neck of the woods? I mean, literally nobody believed when we set off with the Gorton and Denton by-election campaign, and we said, we're throwing the kitchen sink at this. And people were like, really? And we showed them. We showed that we could do it. So anybody who underestimates the Greens, they do so at their peril.
Quite comfortably.
We did. Yeah.
The Greens have also launched a new initiative this week, calling on Burnham. That's so weird, isn't it? Like, in itself. As I was reading the press release, I found it really struck me that you're calling on Burnham to do stuff, but you are calling on him to reduce energy bills. And what's the detail of the proposal? Like, how do you reckon you can do that?
Look, I mean, we recognise people are facing an absolute cost of living crisis, and energy bills are a key part of that. And there is action that the government can and should take to help people with that. We've seen the price cap going up today. We're saying that there are things things that Burnham could and should do. So specifically, take remaining policy costs off of bills and put them into general taxation. And we've made specific proposals around wealth taxation, which would easily cover that. Right. So taking policy costs off would be about £120 off the average bill. Yeah. And then another roughly £30 off the average bill if we took the cost of historic debt off energy bills and again absorb that into general taxation. Because what's happening at the moment is households are paying not just for the energy that they are using now, and not just for the policies that are making positive changes now. For example, the policies that assist people who are really struggling with their bills, or incentivizing transition to renewables, or helping with home insulation programs, those sorts of things. But they are also paying historic costs, kind of past costs associated with the energy debts that have been racked up by consumers who've been hit over the past few years with these huge hikes in bills, which are due, of course, to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. That is where the problem actually comes from. That's the root cause of the vast majority of this problem. And, of course, consumers are also paying the cost of future investment because network costs are also placed on current bills. So the infrastructure that we are rightly building. So, of course, absolutely, we need huge investment in the grid. We have, as a country, unfortunately, underinvested in infrastructure for decades in all sorts of respects, including, we've actually underinvested in new infrastructure like broadband infrastructure. We've underinvested in reservoir building and water infrastructure. We clearly totally underinvested in water supply infrastructure because all of the pipes that, I've got constituents, unfortunately, with terrible regularity who are letting me know that they've got no water because the water pipes have burst because this infrastructure is so old. So we need to be investing in infrastructure, but that's long-term investment. Yeah. So, I think we should also be exploring, and we've called on Burnham to look at how we can also take the network investment costs off bills. Now, that's significant sums of money. We've demonstrated how we can take the policy costs and the debt costs off bills. Right now, that is something Burnham could put in place straight away, and that would save the average household £150 off their bills.
And are you encouraged by the renationalisation plans of public utilities that he seems to be pretty keen on?
He's making some positive noises, right? He's making positive noises about potentially public ownership of water. We really want to see that.
Crazy to privatise in the first place.
Absolutely crazy. And it's been quite interesting.
No one else has done that.
Yeah.
Only the UK went so far as to say, we'll just privatise water. Yeah. What could go wrong?
Yeah, globally, we are by far the most privatised system. And it's had all sorts of kind of, well understood problems in terms of service to customers, environmental damage, pollution and so forth. And it's been fascinating to see kind of Labour over the last 2 years totally digging their heels in, kind of defending the status quo and sort of saying, we'll do something about the executive bonuses and stuff like that, but not being willing to kind of get to grips with the underlying problem, which is that private ownership and profit-driven running of infrastructure where there is no possibility of competition because it's an inbuilt monopoly, physical monopoly, was madness. So I am encouraged by noises from Burnham about that, and we will be pressing him to take that action as quickly as possible. And of course, he's also made positive noises about council house building, which, again, something that the Greens have been talking about for a long, long time. It was outrageous, the sell-off of council houses. We've been calling for buying the supply. We also want to see rent controls on private housing. And so on all of these areas, I think there is a lot of space for the Greens to be pushing the Burnham government.
At a very basic level, isn't a higher price an effective mechanism for reducing consumption, encouraging efficiency and things like that? So shouldn't the Greens be the last party that's calling for low energy bills?
No, I think that's far too kind of simplistic. I know you're playing devil's advocate there, Alex, but that's far too.
I don't know what.
That's far too simplistic an argument, right? Because somebody with a household with several children are likely to be using far more energy than somebody like me.
Who's out all the time, not really
out
at
all
home.
the time. Good salary, etc., etc.
And people with a bit of spare cash can update their
boiler or the heat
and make
pump
their
or
home
whatever,
much more efficient.
Exactly.
etc.
So this is what the role of the state should be, to take active steps to shape the market, to take active steps to encourage that investment. So yes, absolutely, fundamental to green identity to want more energy efficiency. You know, in promoting policies like this to help people with their bills, we're not at all saying, oh, we're just going to make the bills cheaper so that people can keep using more and more energy and not do energy efficiency. Actually, again, in debates this morning, Labour MPs were talking about their constituents forced to choose between heating and eating. You know, that is, I mean, it's a soundbite, but it is a reality for far too many people.
Absolutely true.
For far too many people. And that is a scandal in a country that is theoretically as rich as we are. The problem is inequality. And so as Greens, we've always been absolutely clear. We want a greener and a fairer country. And those two things have to go together. So we don't want people to be kind of shivering in 3 layers of jumpers and call that, you know, fantastic because they're
Net
using
zero.
less energy.
Yeah.
I mean, that is completely not what we're about at all. We want people to be warm in their homes. And that's why we also talk not just about ways that government could shape policy to cut bills straight away, but we talk about the investment that the country needs to upgrade existing housing and crucially to make sure that when we are building new houses, whether they're council houses or privately owned houses, cycling back to where we started off today, they've got to be properly fit for the future.
For the heat as well.
Exactly.
Ellie, give us a call to action for our listeners. What would you like them to do?
I would like to call on your listeners, actually, to lobby their MP and lobby Andy Burnham to change our voting system, because I think that would make a real difference. There are no magic bullets in fixing politics, but we have a moment now. We have a Prime Minister incoming who literally said, proportional representation is an idea whose time has come. We now need to hold him to account on that, because the problems that we've got in this country, short-term policy making, growing inequality, polarisation, all of these things, the kicking of cans down the road on social care, on climate action, on house building, all of these things require a different style of politics. So isn't it significant that in Andy Burnham's first big speech on economics and devolution, actually, he spent the first part of it talking about the tone of politics and the form of politics that he wants to see. Well, let's make that real. And we make it real by bringing proportional representation in before the next general election so that every person's vote counts equally, which means every person's voice counts equally. That is the basic, fundamental keystone, foundation for building a better politics in this country.
You can come back on the show. And of course, had Keir Starmer, who himself admitted, and the National Policy Framework and all of the unions and the Labour Party membership who all backed PR years ago, had he delivered on changing first past the post to a list system, there would not have been a by-election in Makerfield. It would have gone automatically to the next person on the list. So he himself might be
Rub salt in the wound.
Quiet Riot.
Now it's time for Alex to tell us what's been happening over the pond that we don't get to hear about here in Old Blighty. It's time for God Bless America.
Hail to America and liberty. Hail the story and the glory of democracy.
Alex, what have you got for us?
Listen, with the 4th of July almost upon us, I will not apologise for the fact that I must once again concentrate on the planned Washington festivities, including, yes, the latest from Trump's cursed algae-infested water feature, because it just feels like such a perfect metaphor for this dangerously comical administration. It's somehow both ludicrous and incredibly deadly. It is epic in its proportions. It's almost like there should be a myth about a narcissist being undone by a reflecting pool. I'll think on about that. Anywho, the Great American State Fair, or the Washington National Mall, was billed as the number one, I quote from Trump, the number one attraction anywhere in the world, who boasted that he could attract, and again I quote, much larger audiences than Elvis. Well, looking at an aerial view of the empty enclosures, perhaps from heaven, the king might reply, Tens of thousands of visitors descended on the US Capitol to attend the fair. Apologies, my mistake. Tens of visitors descended on the US Capitol, leaving Fox News to report, "Don't believe what the Democrats are telling you. This is a brilliant success and packed, quite literally standing in front of a deserted fair." Several states refused to take part, so the fair had to be privately funded. Sponsors have pulled out after promotional videos included, apparently by accident, Confederate flags.
Oh.
The fair was blasted by rain and hail at one point, which, according to the logic of the evangelicals, is conclusive proof that God hates them. Even the last remaining act that had not pulled out cancelled at the last minute. Vanilla Ice has left the building. A MAGA social media influencer was arrested and charged with lewd, indecent or obscene acts after witnesses told police they observed what appeared to be a sexual act while he was watching a troupe of female circus performers.
Oh, no.
He was dressed as Uncle Sam at the time.
Oh.
I mean, I'm not making any of this up.
Alex.
Beer was not allowed, reportedly according to the teetotal president's wishes, probably for the best, as big portions of the fair lost power, leaving corn dogs unfried and ice cream melting, not to mention rides stopped midway, including a Ferris wheel for hours. So what was pitched as a lap of honor for America's favorite, he says, president, became just a rolling series of abject humiliations. On the other hand, as a setup for the biggest ever Ghost Fairground Scooby-Doo episode, it was perfect. And then there's the reflecting pool, Trump's pride and joy. The jewel in his crown was meant to be a sapphire, but ended up an emerald. Chicken wire fences have now been erected all around the water feature. Since it has become the focal point of Trump's failure, it has attracted dozens of journalists, but as it is on public land, it has also attracted many protesters. Some wearing T-shirts that read Team Algae, some with megaphones, creating magical moments like this.
So what did you learn about this other company?
Yeah, interesting. This is a New Jersey-based company called Sika, and they were part of these renovations many years ago during the Obama administration. And they were actually contacted by the Trump administration to have part and take part in this renovation now. And
because there's cameras now there all the time, and it's public land, so everyone has turned up, and he's basically doing a Steve Bray. It's sort of fantastic. As if all this was not enough, details have emerged that a no-bid $1.7 million contract to fix the issues of the Lincoln Memorial Pool has been awarded to a company part-owned by a Trump donor that has never worked on a pool before, and which, as if to provide this cosmic joke with a perfect punchline, is called, anyone? Green Water Services. I promise you, all of this is absolutely true.
Wow. We will not leave any links in the show notes, listeners. But Alex, thank you. Listeners, send us your suggestions of the nuttiest stories going on in the great US of A to quietriotpod@gmail.com. And that's your lot for today, folks. An enormous thank you to Ellie for joining us once again.
Absolute pleasure.
You feel like part of the family.
Yeah, you must come on more often. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget our latest B-side episode is out tomorrow with a deep dive on Scottish politics. There has been a lot going on, and a look at what Andy Burnham's devolution plans could mean for Holyrood.
And before you tune out, remember to head over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod to sign up for as little as $5 a month or more to help us keep this show on the road.
And we'll be back again at the weekend with Sunday School, so you never have long to wait to hear from us again.
But if all that isn't enough, you can always go hoover up our sister shows, Podyssey and Behind the Lines too. We love you lots.
Bye!
Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canellu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
We got rid of the algae, which they put in. They put in algae. Who the hell put in algae?